Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen nabiyyina Muhammadi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'du, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to our Fiqh Hour. This is episode 2 of our Hajj special. We started that on Monday, so we will continue that. On Monday, obviously, we started with introduction, in which we gave some understanding of terminology that we will be going through. Similarly, we talked about the importance of Hajj and the warning against those who don't go to attend Hajj, and also the fadail and the excellences with regards to Hajj. So we've set the stall. We've talked also about the time that a person goes for Hajj, and also the key aspects, the key conditions that are required, and the key conditions which ensures that Hajj is valid. We're now going to focus a little bit more now on the pillars of Hajj, and then we'll actually go through the practical aspect of it, so people will have a good understanding of what the practical way is to perform Hajj. So Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So in terms of Hajj, now remember, we have something called shart and we have something called rukn in all the compulsory acts that we perform. Shart is something which precedes the ritual act. So for example, the shart of salah is wudu. So wudu is not part of salah. It is actually comes before salah. So therefore it is a condition which leads to it. And qira is a rukn of salah, meaning qira is within salah. So both the shart and the rukn have to be there in order for that act to be valid. So we spoke about the sharait of Hajj last session on Monday. So now we're going to talk about the rukn or arkan or ruknan, due to the tasniya, the dual, because there are two pillars of Hajj. The first pillar is what is referred to as al-wuquf. Okay, al-wuquf, this actual station, this standing, this waiting in a place called Arafah. And this is the first pillar of Hajj. Even if a person stands there for a few moments, it is absolutely required to do so. However, there is a time to stand there. The time of standing at Arafah begins when the sun moves from the meridian on the 9th of Dhul Hijjah until the dawn of the 10th of Dhul Hijjah. So that's the time that we will go across to Arafah. Bearing in mind, obviously, you're not going to necessarily keep a timetable where you think, oh, I have to be here at this time, I have to be there at that time. This has been pretty much made easy for all of us, because what we have is we have the person who's been given responsibility for our group, and they will have coaches booked for us, and we will move around in the coaches from one destination point to another. But it's good to bear in mind that obviously this rukn, this is something without it, Hajj is not done. So you will find that no matter what, whether it is a person who is in a helicopter or something, or even somebody who is in an ambulance, however, there will always be, even if it means for a moment, that person has to station themselves in this place called Arafah. The second rukn is, without it, Hajj is not done. And this second rukn is to perform tawaf ziyarah. So this is also a necessity. This is also is sometimes referred to as tawaf al-ifada. So these are also important to do. And what is a tawaf? Tawaf is to do 7 circuits, okay, around the Kaaba, keeping the left shoulder towards the Kaaba and circumambulating anti-clockwise, if memory serves me well. And this is what is also required, this tawaf ziyarah. So therefore, these two acts, if they are not performed, then there is no way to repair the Hajj. There is no way to fix it. That's it. The Hajj is gone. You would still perform the acts that everybody else is performing, but you will be required to perform the Hajj again, because without these two, the Hajj is invalid. So important to bear that in mind. There next what I refer to as the wujub. So this, the one we mentioned are And therefore, in terms of from a fiqh basis, there is very little difference between fard and wajib from a technical basis. This only is when we start to see what dalil it is based upon that we give this different hukum of wajib. I'll give you an example. Witr is necessary to perform, as is the 4 rakats of Isha necessary to perform. However, one we give the hukum of fard, and the earlier one we give the hukum of wajib. But it doesn't change the performance or the requirement of the performance of those acts. All it does is it tells the ulama of what dalil this was based on. So we mentioned the 2 arkan of Hajj. We're now going to mention the 8 areas which are regarded as necessary. So just as a reminder, the 2 arkan of Hajj, one was staying at Arafah. This was after Zawal. On the 9th up until the morning of the 10th. And the second point was to perform Tawaf Ziyarah, which is 7 circuits around the Kaaba, or Tawaf al-Ifada, sometimes as it's referred to. So those are absolutely must. Okay. The other areas, for example, are now what we refer to as wajib. Okay. So wajib is al-wukuf bi Muzdalifa. So the first wajib is to stand in Muzdalifa. Okay, even if it's only for a moment. Again, this is another place where a person has to go. What time? Because remember, we said that Hajj is one of those issues where it is a specific act in specific places at specific times. If you recall from Monday's session, it's very important to understand that specific acts at specific times in specific places. So therefore, it is important that is understood from that perspective. So staying at Muzdalifah, and this is from the dawn of the 10th of Dhul Hijjah. Remember, the night before we've spent at Arafah. So dawn on the 10th of Dhul Hijjah until the sky is very bright. Okay, that's the time. The second wajib is to perform sa'i bayna safa wal marwa. To make sa'i is known as adopting a slightly hastily approach between the 2 green areas. You see them usually lights that are there that we go across from those points, and that is between Safa and Marwa. Now, and Safa and Marwa, they were small hillocks. Now it is, due to time and building and all the rest of it, there's not much of an ascension. There is still a slight ascension, but there's not much of an ascension as you climb up as-Safa. When you leave from the corner of Hajar Aswad and you go into that direction, you'll see it's slightly elevated, because when you look back, you can see the Kaaba. So remember, from as-Safa, you can see the Kaaba, but from Al-Marwa, you cannot see the Kaaba. And then you would slightly descend. I said it's not a huge descension. As you would reach the kind of base of the, I won't call it a valley, but the little bit in the middle, it's not that little. It's quite, if you're not used to walking, it's quite long. And then you would rush, men in particular would rush between the 2 green lines until they would ascend at the other end. And this is done 7 times from one direction to the other, across 7 times. So even though you start at as-Safa, you will finish at Marwa. Okay. The third one is Ramyul Jimar, the Jamara fi Ayyam al-Nahr wa Tashriq. It is the pelting of the Jamaras, the sort of walls now, which represent that, on the day of Nahr and Tashriq. The first one is called Al-Jamra al-Kubra, and this is next to Al-Khayf Masjid. And then the second one is Al-Jumr al-Wusta, and the final one is Al-Jumr al-Aqaba. So that's the third thing. The fourth thing is Tawaf al-Sadr. Okay, Tawaf al-Sadr or Tawaf al-Wada. And this is again wajib upon those who other than those who reside in Makkah. So if you reside in Makkah, there's no need to perform that, because obviously with the fact that you're staying in it, you're not going to say farewell to the Kaaba. But those people who are going to leave Makkah, they will say farewell to the Kaaba. Again, there's difference of opinion on that one. Some consider this to be sunnah and not wajib. So that's one thing to bear in mind. Finally, the fifth one is, not the final one. The fifth one is al-halq or taqsir. This is to shave or cut the hair. Remember, for men, shaving is afzal, more superior compared to cutting the hair. For women, obviously, they will cut their hair a finger's length. This is when is this done? Because remember, there's always got to be, remember, this is key, specific acts, specific times, specific places. So whenever there is an act, there will always be a specific time associated with the act, and there will also be a specific place associated with the act. Hence, that chronological order needs to be maintained, and also the physicality, the geographical location also needs to be maintained. This is important. So this is done after the first stoning of the Jamal al-Aqaba, which is done on the 10th of Dhul Hijjah, and it should be done in the Haram. That is the process for it. The sixth one is to adopt the Ihram, and that is from one of the miqats. So obviously, as we fly over and we're going to land in Jeddah, then we need to make sure that we are in Ihram already, in order to be ready for that, because we cannot reach to the point of performing our circumambulations and performing our Hajj unless we are in Ihram. So Ihram is the sixth one, okay? The sixth act which is considered as wajib. And the seventh one, again, this applies to the male, is to kashfu ra'si wal wajh, to make sure that the head and the face is uncovered. Okay, so they do not cover, they do not wear a hat, they do not wear any, if it's very dusty due to a sandstorm or something, they don't cover their face. Similarly, when they're going to sleep or rest, they don't put a cover over the face, pull a blanket over their face. So they make sure that they have the head and face uncovered. For a woman, obviously, she maintains the covering of her head, but if she's practicing the niqab, then what she will make sure is to not allow the cloth to touch upon her face. So what she would do is she would usually get something, they used to get a stick or something back in the day, but now what you have is like a cap where it pushes the veil away from the face. And obviously she will not wear gloves if she normally wears gloves. And the eighth one, again, this applies to men, is to not wear stitched garments. So to not wear clothing that has been stitched. So that would be things like, for example, shirts, that would be trousers, that would be any type of clothing which can be stitched. Hence, the ihram for a man is to have one loose piece of cloth that he wears on the top and one loose piece of cloth that he wears on the bottom. Okay. Wearing the ihram is also a skill. So what one should do is they should get the material, okay, and open the material up behind them. And when they open the material up behind them, they should take because they're holding the edges of the material, they should then take the cloth across there and hold it in the right hand, okay. So now they're holding both pieces of the ends of the cloth in the right hand, and one is going behind his body and one is going in front of his body. And then he should pinch at the side near his hip whilst his legs are stretched out. He needs to stretch his legs out. The reason being is that when he is walking, he needs his gait. He needs to make sure that his legs can stretch. Otherwise, it's going to be very uncomfortable to walk. So he stretches his legs out. He's got it there at the hip. And then he starts to bring it in and sort of pleats it, folds it in, and then he will fold it under or over to hold it. That's the way. And what that will do, obviously, so there's got to be some practice that a person has to do at home. There's no point trying your ihram on for the first time when you arrive in Mecca or something, or as you're at the Manchester airport or whichever other airport you are at, for example, because this can be a bit embarrassing because you're not wearing anything underneath the ihram, underneath the lower garment, the izar, and that can be a little bit embarrassing. So make sure you practice that and you understand that. And also when you're sitting down, also be aware that you're wearing an ihram. Some people kind of forget and they draw their legs up to their chest, or they sit inappropriately, not realizing that, everything is visible to all and sundry. So 2 steps. One is, as I said, you hold the cloth out, from behind you. You bring one hand over to the hand over to the right hand, which makes the cloth come in front of you. You now hold it across there. You stretch your legs out, okay, like a scissors. Stretch your legs out as far as necessary, and then you clip it here with your waist, and then you start to fold it and pleat it, and then you turn it up to grip it. Some ulama have permitted the use of a money belt in order to carry your money in it, and then one can use that to kind of hold his izar up, but really that's something one should avoid, for the very reason why that this izar is something that should be not fastened and should be held up without it. Okay, so that's important that one practices so they know how to do that. So you can't wear a stitched cloth. Let me just quickly see some of the questions that come through. The authorities don't let men in at certain times to do tawaf without wearing ihram. So some men then wear ihram just to get access to that area where they have no reason to wear ihram. Does the Saudis have legitimacy to do this and can wear them to access the area where they ain't doing Hajj? Well, who am I to say whether anyone has legitimacy or doesn't have legitimacy? At the moment, the Saudi authorities it's their country, and the Haramain is in their country. So therefore, they've got authority over that country. So I guess they can do as they please, and they, that's what they do. Whether I agree or disagree with it, it's just to a certain extent irrelevant. And even if I disagree with it, there's nothing much one can do. So when it comes to a man, if a man is not, for example, in the state of ihram, okay, if a man is not in the state of ihram, remember the cloths are not ihram. That's important to understand. Ihram is when you make niyyah. Okay, so as soon as you make niyyah, you are now in a state of ihram. So what happens usually, people might here in the UK or whichever country is their residence, they may wear the izar under their jubba, for example. So they'll wear the izar a bit like a lungi under their jubba, and then it's only when they land in a country that's on the way to the Haramain or at the airport or something, they might then take their jubba off, or on the plane, they may then just pull their jubba off and put the other piece of cloth on. That doesn't make no difference. It's when they make niyyah, pray the 2 rakats and make niyyah, now they are in a state of ihram. And one of the conditions of being in a state of ihram is not wearing stitched clothing. And that's why the 2 pieces of cloth exist. Can a normal person, wear 2 pieces of cloth? Of course they can, because it's not required that clothing you wear has to be stitched. So, but the key thing is that obviously your body is covered, and he can wear a hat as well. But if it means that can a person perform tawaf, or can a person pray salah with an izar on and a cloth covering the top part of his body? Of course he can, because that is the requirement. So there's no issue with that. So I hope that makes sense. Can you wear leather socks? No, you can't wear leather socks, because obviously leather socks, firstly, are stitched clothing, and you're not permitted to have stitched clothing. And secondly, the bone that is at the bridge of your foot, where your toes connect to your foot, that bone is supposed to be uncovered, and a leather sock will obviously cover that. So you normally wear slippers that have very little covering the surface of your foot, the bridge of your foot, for that very reason. Okay, so do keep relevant questions coming in, please. So next we move to, so we've covered the, it's always good to remind ourselves, so hope you're taking notes. So we had the 2 arkan of Hajj, which is fard. One was the wukuf in Arafah, and the second one was tawaf ziyarah. Then we've had 8 acts which are wajib. In there we had the staying at Muzdalifah, we had the sa'i between Safa and Marwa, we had the pelting of the jamarat, we had the shaving or cutting of the hair, we had the wearing the ihram at the point of miqat, and we'll talk about miqat shortly. Next was keeping the head and the face uncovered, and also we had wearing unstitched clothing. Next, we look at the sunan of Hajj, and there are many sunan of Hajj. Okay, there's many, and I'm not going to make this a little bit more complicated than it needs to be, because this is more of a basic kind of understanding of Hajj, what I do suggest for you to do is to read up on the topic and memorize things. I know many of us go there and just hope that we're going to just follow the crowd. Why you're doing an act of worship? Why follow the crowd? When you're praying salah, do you look at the person to your right and to your left when you're praying salah? You should know yourself you're praying salah. If there's that element of doubt when you're performing an act of worship, you're not going to connect in your act of worship. You want to connect with your act of worship. So the best thing to do is memorize things beforehand. And of course, sometimes we forget, so it doesn't hurt to resort to somebody. But really, that should be on the more technical questions. Questions which we're a bit confused about, questions which we're not sure about, and we need some expert opinion on. Otherwise, really, the basics of Hajj are not that complicated. It's unfortunately because our head is full of everything but our religious acts. That's why we forget. Okay, so we should go over these things regularly. So, for example, one of the sunan of Hajj is to perform ghusl. Okay, this is before the person's going into ihram. So you've got to be practical here. Depends where you are, obviously. So it might be an idea that before you set off from your home, that you perform your ghusl then, rather than trying to perform ghusl at an airport or something like that, or on the plane or something. Let's be realistic. Okay, we've talked about the izar, obviously, and we've talked about the top cloak, or rida as it's referred to. And it is sunnah to perform 2 rakats nafil, as I mentioned earlier. Thirdly, to pronounce talbiyah as much as possible. We'll talk about what talbiyah is once a person is in a state of ihram. And when one arrives, then it is sunnah to perform tawaf al-qudum. Okay, this is the tawaf of arriving. However, what tends to happen is people perform umrah when they first arrive because they're performing hajj tamattu. And if they're performing hajj tamattu, then obviously in those cases, they tend to perform the tawaf in there, and then that tawaf gets done. Okay. So remember this, we've so far touched upon 3 types of tawaf. Just to remember, there is tawaf al-ziyara or tawaf al-ifada, which is fard. Okay, that was one of the 2, if you remember, that was fard. Then we talked about tawaf al-wida or tawaf al-sadr, which according to some is wajib and according to some is sunnah. And the third one is definitely sunnah, which is tawaf al-qudum. And the following is also considered to be acts which are sunnah. So one is that when you wear the ihram and you wear the cloths and you go into the state of ihram, then to send durood upon the Prophet ﷺ and to make dua, because you're now going into a sanctified state. You're going into a highly spiritual state. And because you're going into a sanctified state, a highly spiritual state, you need to call on, send durood upon the Prophet ﷺ and also make dua. To obviously do takbir and to say one's tahleel, yani la ilaha illallah. This is when a person reaches near the Kaaba. To do as many nawafil tawaf as possible when the time permits. Having said that, one needs to kind of pace themselves. That the person arrives in Mecca and that's it, he's just in the haram all day and he's doing tawaf and tawaf and tawaf and tawaf, and he gets fatigued and he gets dehydrated and he falls ill. Then the 8th of Dhul Hijjah arrives and this poor chap can't get out of bed. And now he needs to be strong. He needs his physicality. He needs to be able to now perform the rites of Hajj. And he can't do that. So what he did was he prioritized supererogatory, he prioritized the sunnah, he prioritized the nafil, and to the consequence of his fard Hajj. So as much as it's desiring and as much as the passion is driving you and the zeal is driving you to go and do tawaf after tawaf in the haram, hold yourself back. Okay, hold yourself back. Go for the compulsory prayers and maybe do 1 or 2 a day or something, or nice and steady. Remember, you're getting acclimatized. That's the first thing. You're rehydrating, which is the second thing. You're trying to recuperate your lost strength because of traveling for 24 hours. So there's a lot going on. So the last thing you want to do is exacerbate things and go crazy and do nafil after tawaf after nafil, tawaf after nafil, tawaf. And now you're so fatigued that you can't perform the rites of Hajj. Once the Hajj is performed, then feel free. There's no restrictions now because you've completed your Hajj, alhamdulillah. to leave Mecca for Mina after the sunrise of the 8th of Dhul Hijjah. So as soon as sunrise happens, to leave Mecca and go to Mina, to spend the nights in Mina and in the days of Mina. It's important. So people think, oh, you know what, I'll go back to my hotel. I'll just stay in a nice hotel. There's no point. Okay, stay in Mina. That now, the standards are getting better and better. The first time I went to Mina, we sort of slept on the hard floor. It was a carpet floor, if I remember correctly. This is going back in the early noughties. We slept on, and my father went even before that. When we went in the noughties, we slept on a carpet floor. When we went more recently, well, when I say recently, it's nearly 10 years now, alhamdulillah, then it was kind of cushion beds. Now I hear the quality is even better. Now there's, water and food and whatever. We had to look for food the first time we went around in the noughties. We had to literally look around and see if there was any people parking up selling food. Now, obviously, there's far more, the better catering there, better facilities all day long. So there's no excuse really now to want to come back and stay in one's hotel. So you're only going, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. Why waste that once in a lifetime opportunity to stay in a hotel for a few days? Go and stay the nights in Mina. To offer the 5 prayers in Mina as well. That's the best place for them in those days. Remember, I keep repeating this, but it's important to know. Specific acts at specific times in specific places. Very important that we keep that in mind. Those who are performing ifrad, to offer the sacrifice as well once the Hajj is done, and to drink the water of Zamzam as soon as the opportunity arises. I know now, unfortunately, because of our access to Zamzam here in the UK and in other countries, become a little bit spoiled. So we're losing the value of it. I remember as a child that when people would come from Hajj, it was a big thing. Everybody would say, oh, Haji Sahib, whatever, like it was, that he'd just become an angel or something. And we would rush and we would get little thimbles of Zamzam water, tiny little small samples of it, where, if you weren't careful, you probably, used most of it up to wet the inside of the cup and the rest of it would go. And you'd use your fingers to get the rest of it out because it would go, it'd be completely finished. Now, obviously, like I said, we're spoiled a little bit. So even when people are coming from Hajj, we tend not to see the excellence of it. We tend not to value it anymore like we used to back in the day. So, it's unfortunate that when you get more of something, you devalue it. Sometimes it's better when you have less of something because the value is there. Again, it is sunnah for the man who wishes to perform the sa'i between as-Safa and Marwa, that after tawaf al-Qudum, that he does ittiba prior to the tawaf and ramal in the first 3 circuits. We discussed ittiba last week, if you remember, where he uncovers his right shoulder, takes the rida under his right shoulder and throws it over his left shoulder when he's performing tawaf. And in the first 3 circuits, he does ramal. Ramal, again, we said, where he sticks his chest out and is a little bit more forceful in his demeanor as he's walking. His gait is a little bit more firm as he puts his feet down. But remember, take into consideration the context. There's going to be a lot of people there. There's not going to be much elbow room for you to start hitting people. And remember, it is fard and it is haram to avoid. It is fard to avoid causing pain to anybody, and it is haram to cause pain to anybody. That's important to understand. And this is a sunnah. So again, it's about valuing things and important that we prioritize things. And the matter, the act which is being given priority, we also give it priority. Now we've talked about miqat and we've talked about going into ihram. Remember, it is not just the clothes. I know everybody seems to think that it's ihram clothes that makes a person go into ihram. If that was the case, then women would never go into ihram because they don't wear the 2 pieces of cloth. Okay, so therefore it is important to understand that ihram is when a person makes the niyyah. That's the key thing here, makes the niyyah. And when they make the niyyah, they need to make sure that all the sharait are there. And one of the sharait obviously is that you are not wearing stitched clothing. If you're a chap, that your head is not covered. If you're a chap, that your face is not covered for either. That you're not wearing gloves. And for the chap, that your feet aren't covered. So in all of these circumstances, important to understand that the clothing itself is not putting you into ihram. It is the niyyah that puts you into ihram. So, for example, in salah, it is not that you have to have your aura covered and then you're in salah automatically. No, you go into salah when you make niyyah, but the shart is that your aura is covered. So I hope that makes some sense. So at what point are you supposed to be in ihram with the niyyah? At what point? Now we mentioned the miqat, okay? So we have the various places which are the miqat. And this depending on where you're coming from. Now, we're not going to necessarily memorize this, so there's probably no point in going into too much detail with you. But it is like an approximate sort of diamond shape. So you have Dhul Hulayfa at the top, okay? And then you have Dhat Irq coming down here on the eastern side. And then you have Yalamlam at the bottom, okay, and then you have Qarn al-Nazil we got there, which is for Najd, and you have Al-Juhfa, which is on the west. So, if I can show you this book, for example, you'll see that it is from there, 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 and then back up here. So it's like a kind of a like a diamondy shape, and a kite shape is probably better. Like a kite shape, but upside down, where the tail is up and the top end of the kite is down. So yeah, a kite is probably a good example. Imagine a kite when it's falling down, and that's roughly the shape. What does this mean? What this means is that in this area, if you're coming to perform a ritual act pilgrimage, you are supposed to be in the niyyah and state of ihram before you go past this boundary. You cannot go, if you're going to perform a ritual act of worship of pilgrimage, you cannot go past this boundary line. You cannot go past this. Well, it's not an actual line, if you know what I mean. It's a imaginary line. You cannot go past this unless you have made the niyyah for ihram. And if you have made the niyyah for ihram, then obviously you cannot wear stitched clothing. So that's what that is, and that's what we need to understand. Okay. So really, for those, so when it comes to al-Juhfa, this is for those who are traveling. This is al-Juhfa is where are we there? It's on the western side of the kite shape that I was talking about. So anybody who's coming from Syria, anybody who's coming from the Maghrib, Northwest Africa, or anything like that, they will go past Juhfa. So they've got to make sure that they are in a state of ihram before they do that. Okay. Those, for example, in Zul Hulayfa, which is at the top end near Medina, then obviously those people who are coming down from Medina, then Dhul Hulayfa is actually the point that they need to be in ihram in beforehand. That Irq, which obviously comes from the word Iraq. So anybody who's coming from that part of the world, Iraq, Iran, that part of the world, then they need to be in a state of ihram. Okay. And then we have Qarn, where are we? Qarnun Nazil. And this is for those who are coming from the Najd, which is part of the Arabian Peninsula. And finally, Yalamlam, which is towards Yemen. And this is for those who are coming from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Malaysia, Indonesia, then they will come from there. So this is before they actually land in Jeddah, because most people land in Jeddah. They are supposed to be in that state of ihram. Okay, so it's important to understand that. And this is where this boundary exists roughly in that part of the world. And you are supposed to be in the state of ihram before you travel over that boundary. Now, some flights, obviously, they fly in and then they fly back out towards Jeddah. So therefore, one has to be very careful that they've already gone over the boundary. Usually, most of the flights that we go by into that part of the world are Muslim airlines, or Muslim majority country airlines, like Turkey or Saudi or Qatar or Emirates or something like that. So they will inform you anyway. You will see the line of ihram coming. For me, I don't understand why people like to go into ihramlastminute.com. I don't see the point of that. Even if you're in Manchester and you've got to board a plane, then go into ihram there. People panic that, oh, I'll be in a state of ihram for 5 hours extra. For crying out loud, people used to travel by camel and by foot, and when they would reach that point that I just mentioned, so when people were coming from Medina, especially when the Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'in were coming to perform tawaf, coming to perform Hajj, then at Dhul Hulayfa they went into the state of ihram. So they traveled then for days in the state of ihram before they reached Makkah, for days. We want to wait lastminute.com so that we're in ihram for the least possible time. Being in a state of ihram is the highest spiritual state a person can be in. Highest. So why not be in that spiritual state for longer? It's more important. That's why when we talk about tamattu and qiran and ifrad and debate about which one is the afzal, which one is the better hajj to perform, you find that it is the one in which you are in a state of ihram for the longest, which is qiran. Okay. So I think that's that part covered. We're next going to move on to actually detailing the process of Hajj itself and about the various days and what we're supposed to do on those various days. And I think based on that time that this is a good place to pause there, inshallah. And what we'll do is on Monday, when we have our next session on Fiqh Hour, obviously we'll discuss the next point, which now we start moving into the practical way of performing Hajj. So we've covered the arkan, we've covered the wajibat, we've covered the sunnah, we've covered the miqat, we've covered the concept of ihram, we've touched upon the types of Hajj, but we will go into more detail about the types of Hajj. We've also touched upon two particular ritual pilgrimage. One was Umrah and one was Hajj. We're going to explore those two as well and detail them a little bit more. So inshallah, that will be our topic for another few sessions that we have, inshallah. So I'll give it about 30 seconds or so in case somebody's got some burning questions to do with those topics. If not, inshallah, then we can draw this to a close before we bring on the other sessions next week. Do know that we still have obviously the Markaz al-Ifta wal Qāḍī Q&A there, so you can pose your questions there as well if you don't get a chance to come onto the live, and I will take those questions then during the live or the next live in case you are busy between 6 and 7, but if not, easier to come on live and ask your questions, inshallah. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.